as we continue our conversation on the future of the country and a few other important developments, including the fact that the president has now spent 2 years, I have with me a very eminent Nigerian politician, scholar, and writer who was actually the founding national secretary of the Alliance for Democracy. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources the distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Professor Udenta O. Udenta. Prof,
Well,
welcome to Inside Sources.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
It's good to have you here at last.
Thank you. Yes. It took a while, but
Exactly.
I'm happy we're here together.
Thank you so much. So we start by just looking at where Nigeria is today. If you look at where we are today, where do you think we are going? Do you think we are headed to that destiny that we all know is our preferred destination of greatness?
A very deep philosophical question. It just threw at me like a bomb. How do I grapple with it? There are many sides or domains of life, or space of life. We can build, undergird this your comment around. Is it economic? Is it human capital development? Is it educational sector? Is it health? Is it the philosophical foundation of the Nigerian state? Is it constitutional order? For me, the critical element in underscoring this question and then pursuing that kind of vision of the future where this country is headed is the constitutional framework around which you build your democratic tradition. We have a presidential system that is supposed to manage our liberal democracy in a federal format. If you don't get the democracy right, at the level of philosophical conception of the democracy, you cannot get any other thing right. Marx, for example, Karl Marx, which of course you and I know very well, that the history of every hitherto existing society is a history of class struggle. But all class struggle is a political struggle, even when they're economic. So if you don't sort out the politics of the moment and of the future, you can't sort out the economics or any other factor of national life. So if you don't get the politics right, you can't get any other thing right in the future. We haven't gotten Nigeria right because we haven't gotten the politics right. The economic foundation is the base, I understand, but that base is managed. Human resources, capital resources, and so on, natural resources are managed by a group of individuals. In the democracy, they represent the people, they have a social contract with them. But what kind of democracy are you practicing? At the highest level of democratic explanation, you can say liberal democracy of the Western hue was implanted not only in Nigeria, but in Africa as a cure to the big man syndrome. Remember the big man of Arab Moi, of Bokassa, of Idi Amin, and so on, who they believed polluted the African political landscape, in personalized power, and be very authoritarian and very liberal in managing statecraft. So we needed to take a step back from that and implanted liberal democracy through the process of democratization, late 80s, early 90s. But almost 20-something, 30-something years, liberal democracy has failed Africa. Not in terms of its normative claims, liberty, pursuit of liberty and happiness, free press, constitutional order, rule of law, etc. These are normative claims. But in practice, it has never worked out. It hasn't worked out because it's an imposition. Remember the logic of the present conversation of Obasanjo himself is leading. How do we have an African-centered democratic tradition that leverages or privileges our past, our historical journey, our evolutionary pattern and trend, and not just something from outside? So when you crafted the presidential system in a liberal democratic format and say, power Nigerian history, power Nigerian development to the future, it can work. So that's a deep way of looking at it. In more practical terms, you can begin to splinter down what kind of constitution. We have a federal system because we have a diverse group of people, multinational, multi-religious, multicultural environment. So you need a constitution that reflects this unity and unipolarities. We don't have that. This constitution is only federal in name, but unitarist in content. That's one big problem.
Well, I mean, that's let's take that as an opening comment, and let me, kind of divert it more towards what you think ought to happen. I mean, you quoted Karl Marx, and Karl Marx also said that philosophers have interpreted the world
in various ways.
The point is to change it.
To change it.
How do we change this trajectory, Prof?
Now, when nations face existential crisis, you don't summon politicians. You don't summon business people or corporate leaders. a nation summons its intellect. China summoned its intellect, but it was caught in a mix. First, how do we come out of Japanese imperial, conquest of China? How then do we come out of the cruel period of the Civil War? When Chairman launched the Long Revolution, to launch the Cultural Revolution, when China stabilized as a nation that won independence in 1949, the key question was, how do we move China from that phase of convulsive cultural and social disorder to an order of modernity? So the Deng Xiaoping in 1978, with the death of Chairman in 1976, formulated with a group of thinkers a new direction in China, for China. What they call it? Practice overcomes contradictions, which means whatever you do, whether it is in mysticism, spirituality, whatever it is, capitalism, that helps China. It helps to elevate the human standard. It helps to lift up the spirit of the people. It helps to industrialize and modernize China. It's acceptable. And they classified it as socialism or Marxism with Chinese characteristics. Now, 30, 40 years, where do you have China now under Xi Jinping, towering virtually beyond the realm of humanity? China has gone almost ballistic, to use the current Nigerian expression. Yes. Because they saw the future. That future is, how do we construct a society that is modern, that is efficient, that is productive, we can lift millions out of poverty by leveraging on our history, on our civilization, and on our interrelations with the rest of the world. We borrow from Marxism, we borrow from capitalism, we borrow from the mysticism, from Taoism, from Confucianism, all are mixed together to create a new China. In Nigeria, we must summon the intellect of Nigerian people. Where are the scholars in political science and strategic studies? Where are the scholars in development studies? These are the ones, not theory. This time, we sit down with any government, with the government of the day. Not this one, for example, any other government of the day that is interested in working for the future of the country. Right. We have to first and foremost, get our ideological direction, philosophical direction, constitutional direction, the kind of democracy that will work for Nigeria. If you get that and fix it, you will have a situation in which 30 years, 20 years, 40 years, we'll expect an exponential growth in terms of human development index. We expect a reduction in poverty. We expect many components of multidimensional poverty. We expect people having a better life, measurable in every human sphere. But because of an indolent mindset, federalism in this country is a settled issue for many. Presidential system is almost cast in iron, almost canonical. It's something we can't append. The way and manner the state, the subnational relate with the federal center is something which have been defined and nothing can ever change. The moment you find this same level of finality in terms of propositions about how Nigeria we march on, it can never make progress. Okay, Prof. I mean, let's and I really find this quite insightful, especially what you said about the Chinese saying that experiment, practice overcomes contradictions. Contradiction. Very, very interesting. And I want to adjust that even practice at times even overcomes confession. Okay. Because you can say certain things and do a different thing, which is where I want to ask you this question. You were the founding National Secretary of the Alliance for Democracy. Sure. And that party, I recollect very well, came out of the struggle for democracy with NADECO, with Eastern Mandate Union, and Afenifere, coming together to define this kind of thought, came out of this kind of thought that you have just articulated. What happened to that idea? How did it die? What happened is that today, in my moment of rationality, and everybody has moments of rationality, sometimes moments of fancy, and the instinctual thoughts. Right. You ask yourself, this debate about restructuring, beyond the theoretical, horizon of it, can it work? It's difficult to work. It's almost impossible to work. I don't want to disillusion anybody before I answer a question more directly. Okay. Why is it so? You need a gap in the constitutional order for you to restructure. Or else the government of the day must self-implode as a deliberate, intentional choice, the way Fujimori did in Peru in 1992 or 1993. It's a history I do not want to repeat on stage with you here in this studio. A guy won an election, but they didn't like the constitutional order that he inherited and needed something better, and we know what he did. Let's leave it at that. If any government is not prepared to pursue that radical restructuring or reconstruction of the state in that direction, how then do you achieve a sense of restructuring when there is closure at the level of governance? There's a president, we have governors, local government chairmen, and other paratuses of state governance.
Right.
There's no way. And the Constitution permits itself to be amended only in a particular direction. The direction of constitutional amendment can never yield a restructured Nigerian state. So there are two or three things you have to do to restructure. I do not want, again, to go into details in there. One of them would be to overwhelm the state in some sort of direction in order to create that opening. That's what we had in 1998. Abiola won the election. He didn't realize his mandate.
1993.
He won in 1993. He won an election in 93. But I'm talking about 1998 when he died.
Right.
He didn't realize his mandate when he died in 98. And Abacha, who was sub power, died too. There was no democratic constitution. There was no civil order. Absalom Abubakar stepped in because the boys in that state come and step in. In essence, that was a moment of restructuring for the country. Because there was no constitution, there was no democracy.
Right.
And that's what Alliance for Democracy proposed. Actually, the coalition of democratic forces, NADECO, Isemane Union, Afenifere, and some other mass democratic movements said, we will not participate in the pyrotechnics of a transition program. They usually leave the ban on politics, leave the ban on politicians, form new political parties, set out a timetable, hold elections, swear people in, and after 2, 3, 4 years, another disaster. Let us restructure Nigeria now. That's opportunity because Absalom Abubakar, you're not supper. He didn't win any election. He have no mandate. The man with the mandate had died.
Right.
In a sense, rather than a regular transition, let us have government of national unity. They now have a sovereign national conference. That's what NADECO took to him.
Right.
He was very smart. He said, I have no mandate, as you rightly said. Neither do you have a mandate. Our brother with the mandate is dead. So what we do now, it must then climb down from your high intellectual and ideological horse, form a party, and then implement this agenda. Rather than governing the country alone with the absolute mandate, form a government of national unity. Rather than implementing the constitution we're giving you, show this aside and do a sovereign national conference. Brilliant argument, nonetheless. Our leaders and all of the younger ones went and formed Alliance for Democracy. But if you're not part of Absalom's government, you will never be part of the new order. So the PDP that emerged out of the womb of that government, was populated by people in that government. So you have to now find a logical, sequential movement from a military era to a militarized democratic format in which Obasanjo, another military leader, became president. Danjuma became, Minister of Defense. General Guzo became NSA. Abdullahi became Chief of Staff in order to hold the state together.
Right.
So AD now became
the opposition,
a fringe party, no longer a mainstream party with only 6 states to contend with in the Southwest. The process of implosion through various stages of internecine warfare is a story for another day. So
but just to follow up on that, and thank you so much for this insight. I remember that right on this show, before he died, Chief Ayo Adebanjo, who was also involved.
He was a founding deputy national chairman,
Yeah.
ultimately became the chairman of the party.
Right. He said, on this show to me that one of the things that the Alliance for Democracy and Afenifere and all the people agreed was that when the governors were elected in 1999, and I want to check that with you, I'm sure he knows what he's saying, but I want to get your take. He said that the decision was that after the governors were elected, that they should insist that they should not go to Abuja, that they should insist on a new constitution, just like you said, a sovereign national conference. He said that was the agreement. But he said the governors, they bailed out. Do you remember that?
Let's put it this way. The facts may lock somewhere in between. Adebanjo was a grand, the theoretician of a certain kind of political order and an ideologue of our struggle. And of course, his passage heralded, for me, the exit of a season of greatness of mind and largeness of heart. But the facts of the matter will lie in between. Our theoretical suppositions and wish as the ideological force in AD can be matched with the brutal reality the governors were confronted with. You have 6 governors out of 36.
Yeah.
You're already in the minority. You cannot assist governors from the particular region of the country, hurting from years of destabilization and disorder and pain and anguish. And many went into exile, many died. And some people like us suffered massive detention because of support for democracy. And so these 6 governors will hold back the implementation of the result of the transition with the president sworn in, another governor sworn in. How the hell can you stop the march of this kind of democracy, as crazy as that democracy then was? What he can do is to persuade the rest of the other governors in the governors for to say, hey, we participated in this process of change for the sake of it, for national stability. Now we've gotten there. Let us use the instrumentality of the offices we hold to call for this restructuring sovereign national conference. They tried to do so, but of course it was impossible to realize that dream. That's why I talked about closure.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the constitution was all about. We didn't even read it as leaders of the party. We just inherited the document. They hurried to take the military out of the space.
So if you remember that, even at the time Obasanjo was being sworn in 1999, there was no clean copy of that constitution.
So who the heck cared? It's now in future we are caring. We should have cared more then than we are doing now.
But I wanted to also bring out one important point. So you guys formed Alliance for Democracy. You were the founding national secretary. And the man who is currently today the president was a founding member, was actually the one that emerged as the governor of Lagos State in that 1999.
Yes.
With all the ideals that, most of you share, and even people like us who were...
elected with the emergence of AD as a new force,
exactly.
as a new kind of party.
So the progressive arm of the country was clearly, in tune with what AD was doing.
Yeah.
What do you think then happened that we now have Bola Tinubu, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, who was governor then, who was an AD, went to become AC later? Why is it that after 2 years, we haven't seen a clear direction that goes to this idea? In your own view, what do you think is happening?
Okay, first and foremost, if you go back into history, because historical memory making or historicization of extant realities is very crucial in underscoring contemporary realities. AD failed in its mission of change because of what you can call a brutal contestation between the regionalist mindset and the propensity by the rest of us for a bigger national claim. We didn't see the ADs rooted within the Western region, as dominant as the party was there, from the tradition of Awoism right through to UPN, and then through to the Alliance for Democracy. We urged for a much more inclusive, pan-national movement that recognized and respect diversities. That struggle was very intense. It exhausted the moral principles and authority of AD and ultimately imploded its organizational structure. The governors who emerged, including Bola Tinubu, who emerged as the governor of the party, ultimately found themselves, in a situation in which the party no longer could represent that sense of coherence. That sense of coherence being the founding spirit of the party, the direction of the party, post-2003. If you recall, the party didn't field a candidate reasonably as it were in 2003. The simple reason is that they wanted to cut a deal with the president, who didn't get much out of his own zone base in 1999. They didn't want that repeated again in 2003. So you outsmarted our party leaders and caught that kind of deal. But at the end of the day, he told them to flush everybody out. Except Lagos that survived. So the burden was then on that Lagos to now marshal the forces available, pull the resources he could, and then begin that journey. From that, you find that a level of contamination will begin to occur. That contamination is not of the soul of the heart, but of understanding of power. The transition from AD to AC, AT to ACN, ACN to APC was not a logical sequence of ideological growth or progression, but a practical, search for an SPV, special purpose vehicle that would drive the quest for power. So the weakening of the ideological, aura of that period, and then the emergence of what you can call an Miloku spirit, which is now predominant and preeminent in the governing infrastructure of the day. It's what you can say that corrupted that original spirit of AD being an engine of change, a progressive direction for the country, to where you find today the struggle to even find the bearing. What kind of direction is the presidency of Abana Ahmed taking the country to? What kind of economic plan do we have? What is the framework that have been carefully constructed, like mixed document, least document? Where do we feed these economic options into the NEPAD agenda from 2001 to now? So if you look at all that, and then in terms of the political space, you find that the shrinking, that's not what we urged for under AD. Those who went on exile, those who suffered detention here. Now you find in the rise of the hybrid regime, what they call this competitive authoritarianism, It's neither democratic, neither it is completely authoritarian in nature.
Right.
Shutting down democratic spaces, manacling the media, destabilizing multi-party democratic framework by inducing crisis in other parties. That's not the spirit of AD.
Okay.
That's an Emiloku
All right.
spirit.
Very, very interesting, and we're going to go up to that. But I wanted to ask, so you left AD in 2001. Why did you leave? So you left even before that, the 2000.
Yes, of course, but I still remain I still remain very influential in the face of AD for years to come.
Imagine, yeah.
Beyond I remember, for example, when Uncle Bala was crudely assassinated.
Right.
Should be later in 2001.
Right.
Should be November, thereabout.
In December, actually.
About December.
Yeah.
So I had left office months back.
Before that?
Yes, before then. The new chairman of the party, A. Abdul Kadir, was summoned or invited by the DG, DSS, and IGP to come and have a conversation because he died in his house and there were crises in the party in the Southwest and in Osun State. To know whether the crisis in the party could have played a role in what ultimately happened to him in that tragic fashion.
Okay.
He called me to come along with him. He told the DG, DSS then, Dr. Kaudari, said, I can't come and talk to you alone. It's only Udenta that can talk about the party. I'm just a new chairman. We went to see IGP Musley Smith, 2001.
Wow.
And Smith said, Udenta, I have your file. It's from this ground to this level. The same way that I say your file is from this ground to this level, but for good reason. Not because you're a dupe or a fraudster, but you suffered for the country. You're a patriot. So you suffered detentions multiple times. Can we have an insight into this question you're asking me? What happened to the party? What could have led to this? The point I'm making is that even when I had left almost 7-8 months back, I was still called upon to shed light. That persisted in 2003, 2004, before the divorce became complete. What happened was that the moment AD decided to call it some sort of, a deal, not a Frankenstein kind of deal, but some sort of Mephistophelian deal. If you know Mephistopheles, Mephistopheles, of course, was the devil that cut a deal with Dr. Faustus, who was a philosopher, a theologian, a doctor of medicine and science, but wanted more in life. He said, let's go to the devil and cut a deal so that I can become more powerful and preeminent. And he became dominant, punishing kings and popes. But then they would say, so time, you want to die. I probably said, give me life, but time was coming. And he said, can I change this deal? He couldn't change the deal anymore. He suffered the face of finality of death. I'm not talking about devil in the sense of a literal sense.
Right.
PDP wasn't the devil in that sense, but I'm just giving some mythical example.
Right.
That AD cut a deal with the president
and
his party, PDP, and said, we can survive together in the Southwest and across the country.
Right.
We help you to become re-elected, and then you help us to retain our power in the Southwest. They fulfill a part of the obligation. The other one didn't fulfill part of the bargain. So the rest, as the saying, is history. So where we are today, upon reflection, is that AD, as a method, in which you form a party, in which you reason argument, in which you develop thesis to govern a state, in which you try to marshal your ideas to say, what kind of vision do you have? If you go back to your first question, what kind of Nigeria are we anticipating in future? What kind of children and grandchildren, we're going to have? What kind of environment will they inhabit? That was AD then. But ultimately, with the decay of the political infrastructure in Nigeria and the fragmentation of the political order, in fact, that even Bola Tinubu himself, as the former governor of Lagos State and currently the president there, had to move with the wind flow. The flow, how did the wind blow? He moved with the political wind blowing you wherever he goes. So whenever he takes you to power, he's going to cling on to. He will not become an ideological vote to say, I will not resist, I will resist. This kind of level of contamination.
Okay, let's talk about that contamination, and let's talk about it in a more realistic sense.
Okay.
And I like your philosophical underpinnings, but for the benefit of our people, let's bring it down.
Okay.
So, for instance, do you grant, to the president that he has managed, in spite of his other weaknesses, he has managed to be a consistent politician who stood in opposition from that 2003 all the way to 2015. Do you grant that? And if you do or you don't you see a difference in his own model, with his strengths and weaknesses, compared to some of these other characters in opposition who don't seem to know how to stay in one place. At least Bola Tinubu stood in opposition from 2003 to 2015. Do you grant him that credit?
Well, let me put it this way, almost as if you're a mind reader. I had a conversation repeatedly with some of my political associates, my friends for many years, some outside the country. And as if I'm going to go on television with what is going on with the opposition parties, with the defections, gale of defections, and a certain level of what I can consider political idiocy in terms of this mindless, spineless kind of politics we play now.
Yeah.
That he can say something for the president, as harsh as I have to be in many regards with the kind of governance, method he has put out, the pain in the land, the suffering of the people for 2 years, an unremitting regime, of social disorder and then increased security threats. The list can go on and on. What will not recommend me to support this president or even say a good word about it. But what he can talk about is what you said. I said, you grant that to him. That in 1990, in 2003, when he managed to get out of that
Survive,
solve himself there, he didn't run to Abuja to say mainstream himself into the center. Like the governor of Delta State and the former governor said, we need to take our people to the center. An oil-producing state, stupendously rich. Three main sources of money. Ecology fund comes to you because of the denudation of the environment.
Right.
Special derivation fund, 30%, they built into that. Yeah. Then your regular allocation. And you still want to be stable, even though the center that produces nothing and controls nothing in a federal system, in a way. Bola Tinubu did not run to the center. He dug in and began an incremental chipping away of what he felt was an organic power grab by the PDP.
Yeah.
He took Osun. He took Ekiti.
Yeah,
I think moved on to
basically restored,
and so on there. And then dug in as a regional leader and said, I may not get to the presidency as a leader of the southwest axis of the country, but I can now grow the brand. He tested it with Atiku 2007, was a candidate of ACN.
Right.
2011 was Ribadu from the north again.
Yeah.
2015 with Buhari
and won.
And he said, now it's a Milokun time. I have given this to everybody. It's my time to take it. So I have to give that to him.
Yeah.
And I wish the other politicians in the PDP and NLP would learn a lesson from this.
From me.
I said, I will not leave my party, Mr. President.
That's a very important
It's a federal
point.
system. You run Abuja, I run my state.
Yeah.
The money that comes to me should come to me, not because you want it, so you want to dictate to me.
It's because it's my right.
The Constitution has provided this money for me and my people.
Yeah, I mean.
So when you find what I call the decay of thought in Nigerian political practice, it's shocking and alarming. That's why I still love those people within the party infrastructure of PDP. For example, there was a neck meeting of the party, and I looked at that document signed by the acting chairman of the party and said, wow, Elijah Damagu as the acting chairman of PDP could put it up. It's very strong. Where did that meeting hold? The main meeting is held in the lodge of the Bauchi state governor, chairman of the party's governors forum. That's a certain level of strength. Yeah. To say, you've locked up the main office there.
We'll find our way.
We'll find a way somewhere to do this thing. I wish other members of the party, some other governors too, will learn a lesson. You don't insult the president as a governor. You don't put his government down anyhow. But you stay firm as an independent force to say, you are APC. Mr. President, we respect you as our president. I'm PDP. My task is to rebuild my party, reform my party, rebrand the party as an autonomous political force.
Good.
The governor should understand this.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I share that view with you. And, I want us to now take it to what is happening in the opposition and this idea of one-party state. I'll make a comment and then, you make your take. I don't think, Prof, that Nigeria will ever get to one-party state.
We will not get there.
I don't have that fear. But what do you think is, why do you think the opposition that we have today is so fragmented? I have a theory. I think what Atiku did in 2023, running for president at a time when the country had just had 8 years, in my view, seems to be the original problem of the opposition, especially of PDP. And you have to give people like Wike the credit of fighting him on that. Of course, Wike has his own other shenanigans that we'll just put aside. But the point I want to make is that why is it difficult for the opposition, Prof, to simply repeat what Tinubu did?
Okay.
Why is it so difficult?
Now, it's difficult, but it may not be possible. I can tell you about politics. In my place, in Igbo land,
right,
we call it Ndolondolo. Ndorondoro Ochichi. Ochichi is to rule, to govern.
Yes.
Ndorondoro is a struggle
For it.
to govern. You know, it push you like this kind of game, which you pull me here,
Just
I
like,
pull you there.
like Fela said. Oh, no, I think it was Shoika that said that I love my country, I no go lie.
Yes.
He push me, I push him.
Push you. So
I no go go.
Ndorondoro means a process, almost a never-ending, inevitable process, as a consequence of change and search for power, and is a lures and accoutrements. Ndorondoro means that every day you meet, you talk, you quarrel, you disagree, you context. At the end of the day, you come together. Politicians are ghosts. They are malleable, not just in terms of the material essence, morally and ideologically they are weak, but in terms of the spirituality. If you want endorsement by the Northwest APC ahead of time, Mr. President, they will give it to you today. Election is almost 2 years away.
Yeah.
Anything can happen between now and then, and endorsement will become non-endorsement or become fake endorsement.
Cool, yeah.
Politicians who are running away from the parties today may be escaping from some levels of pressure. It could be material pressure, it could be EFCC pressure, it could be human of pressure, it could be intimidation, it could be money being dangled. We hear stories of special allocations, not the allocation you get every month, something that is kept and say, good governor, please, you collect this extra.
And that was the first part of the interview with Professor Udenta. We're going to be continuing with the second part of that interview at the next edition. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. Nigeria will prevail means that Nigeria will win because we will not relent. Hopefully one day we'll get a break. Thank you for watching. My name is Laolu Akonde. And by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.